So last week, I converted one of these fractal gift of tone preset offerings for Guthrie Govan into the quad Cortex. And someone followed up with a request that I try to do the same thing for the John Petrucci settings. And so I went here onto the website and I downloaded what was available for John Petrucci. There's two things. One is these aren't full presets. So the download is actually just blocks. So think of those as just the specific delay settings, I think, is what came. But what they had also done was someone had created a preset called Petrucci Rig that is kind of the official fractal preset for using the Petrucci amps, and mixed in those delay settings with that. And so I downloaded both of those. And so if we look at what we get there, so the JP ones are just these BLKs, which are just blocks in the preset. So I can't really do much with those, but they added those to these full preset settings. And so let's open up that and give it a look. And so here we have our John Petrucci preset from Fractal. So remember, this isn't the preset he created. This is a preset that Fractal created that's using some of the blocks he uses. So I think some of the delays and other effects are the actual effect settings that he uses, but the general flow is built by Fractal. But I think we can learn some stuff from this and we can duplicate this on the quad Cortex. So if you look at the general flow, you've got your input flowing through a wah and a bunch of other upfront effects into your amp and your cab. You've got a send and return here, some more effects on the back end, along with delay and reverb, and then you're out. And if you notice, there's this other input that's going through a compressor and then just through the delay and reverb. I think that's for his piezo pickup on his signature guitar. So that's kind of the acoustic sound right there. So we're going to ignore that. We're just going to stick to the electric guitar path. So let's look at the scenes. So they've creatively titled these, I think, after some Dream Theater song. So Crunch Meander, you've got Our New Chorus, The Miracle in the Clean Chorus, Learning to Lead. So if you notice, as I click through those, the amp, you're switching letters here. That's kind of the settings are changing. So it looks like you've got kind of a rhythmy sound that's B, this clean sound is A, and this lead sound is C. So if we look at the amp on the C setting, the type says USA JP Red. So I think if we switch then to 3, which is the clean, it says green. If you switch to 1, it says, looks like yellow. So I think this red, green, yellow corresponds to channels 3 and 1 and 2, I guess, if I got those in the right order. So the clean is, the channel 1, which is the clean on the quad Cortex, would be the green on this. Yellow would be channel 2 on the quad Cortex, and red would be channel 3. So that's my assumption going forward, and that's what we're going to build out. And so we'll build out, we'll look at this drive and phaser, obviously the amp and cab. I'm going to skip the pitch shifters for the most part. Honestly, the pitch shifter on the quad Cortex, I find sounds really artificial. I don't like it very much. And when you look at the settings for these pitch shifters through this Fractal tool, it's really hard to understand exactly what it's doing. We'll do a chorus and a flange and maybe the rotary, but we'll definitely do the delay and reverb. And so let's head over to the quad Cortex and recreate this. Okay, so this is our attempt to recreate that Fractal preset. If we look at it here, you can see we've got a few upfront effects. We've got our 3 amp models, so channel 1, channel 2, and down here we've got channel 3 and our Mesa 4x12. You notice I split the amps across the 2 different lines. I couldn't get all 3 amps and the cab onto this top line. If you look at the CPU usage, these John amps, especially channel 3, use a lot of CPU. So it's no big deal. We split them up. There's still room for a lot of other effects, as you can see, but just keep that in mind. It's hard to use all three of these amp models together without turning up some CPU. All right, so in terms of the scenes, you can see here I've recreated all of the scenes that they had. I basically color-coded them, so the blue one is using channel 1, the yellow ones are using channel 2, and the red ones are using channel 3. So we start with the clean. What we've got here is we've got our compressor up front. I chose the opto compressor, and we're running it a decent amount of compression, but the release is pretty quick and the attack is pretty quick. We're running that into channel 1, and you'll notice a lot of the EQs of these amps is very scooped. So they all look like this to a certain degree. The clean is more scooped than the others, but all of the amps are set pretty scooped. And then for the chorus, I'm using the 229T. So the rate about halfway, the depth about halfway. It's just kind of straight down the middle chorus. On the back end, on all the presets, we've got a hall reverb. As you can see, the decay and the pre-delay are really low. And actually on the Fractal preset, the mix was super low as well. It was down around 5 or 6% or something like that. And it was hardly noticeable. So I did up the mix a little bit here. You can see it's at 40%, but it's still pretty light. You can hear that's still very slight because that decay and pre-delay are so low. It sounds like a very small room. And then for the clean tones, we're using a tape delay time to 540, a good amount of feedback. I notice his delays have a lot of feedback on them, more than I typically would. And you notice here the mix is 100%. So I noticed the Fractal delays were set to 100% mix, which to me says you're running a wet path and a dry path. I didn't really see that in the layout of the preset, but I don't know how you could have your delay mix at 100% without having a dry path to go along with it. So that's what I've done here. And I am adjusting the mix coming back in. You can see the dry path, which is A, I'm pushing a little bit and then I'm pulling back on the wet path a little bit. Just for me to balance out the amount of delay in the signal from my ear. You can adjust this yourself if you want. And if we switch to the lead tone, the delay for the leads and the crunch tones in general is this dual delay. You can see we're running one at 444 and one at 738. Feedback's at 22% for both of them. And I think that's about it. We're not doing anything fancy with the ducking or anything. Oh, so the high pass is up around 200 and low pass is about 5400. So I did push up the high cut a little bit based on the settings that were on the Fractal. So let's hear the clean tone with the chorus. So a really nice, lush, clean tone. Unfortunately, the guitar I'm playing today, I don't have a guitar with me right now that has a humbucker in the neck. So this guitar has kind of a medium output humbucker in the bridge, a single coil in the neck. So we're not going to get really the pure Petrucci sound that he would get because he'll have that nice warm humbucker in the neck position. So that's the clean tone. For the crunch, again, you can see all these, the gains in that 6 to 7 range. Here, the bass is being rolled back quite a bit, and we're still getting that kind of scooped midsection in the EQ. But it's a nice kind of Petrucci rhythm tone. Really nice thick rhythm tone going on there. You can see it's nothing but the amp cap and the reverb. You can add some chorus to that. And then you've got a rhythm tone with the flanger on. You can see the flanger, the rate's pretty low, but the mix is pretty high. So the flange is pretty in your face. And then this is just adding the delay. And again, this is the same dual delay that we're using on the lead tones. And then for the lead tones, you've got channel 3, again, gains just a little below 7. You've got a slightly scooped EQ. You can see it here. We're dropping a lot of mids out. And one thing you'll notice is none of these scenes are using these two upfront pedals. So if we look at what those are, so we've got an overdrive pedal, which is a tube screamer, and the settings make sense, I think. If you look, he's really not pushing any gain. The tone is about even, just pushing level. So what this is doing is just adding a boost in front of the amp, and it's adding in that kind of tube screamer mid. And so you've got that really scooped setting on the amp for rhythm tones, and then he's kicking it on the front with this mid-focus boost in order to fill in that midsection for some of the lead tones. And so I would think that this would work well for that. And then for the phaser, just using an MX phaser, he uses just a straight ahead, 90 phase with a script mode, mix about halfway, speeds a little less than halfway. And so we can check those out here. So if we're on the lead tone, and here's the lead tone again. And then if we kick in the tube screamer. So you can hear it's kind of filling that midsection really nice. And then if we want, we can add in the phaser. So I think part of the issue with the scenes on this preset are that on the Fractal, you can have your scenes, but then I think you can engage some of the other pedals individually. And so I wanted to take this preset and recreate it with narrowing down the number of scenes so we could use our hybrid mode. And so what I did is I created another version of this, and I played around with a few extra things here that I'll show you. But let's go ahead and move into hybrid mode. We'll long press here. We're going to drag scenes underneath the stomp. And so what I've done is, sorry about that. I forgot when you switch to hybrid mode, it puts you back in the preset. Now we're back in the hybrid mode. So we've got our scenes across the bottom. So the clean chorus, a dry rhythm, a wet rhythm, and the lead. And then for the stomps, we can access our tube screamer, our phaser, our chorus, and our flanger. So this is like the other clean tone. I did make one change. I switched the chorus out. I was doing some just research on Petrucci's rig, and I found I think it was just from 2022, kind of a rig rundown of what he has. And I found that he uses the DC2W, and I looked at the settings the best I could, and I put that in here rather than the other chorus that I was using. So it's a little more prevalent but I think it's a nice kind of full tone. So if we want to, we can turn the chorus off. We can turn on the flanger. We could even kick it with a tube screamer. The other thing I'll say is that other chorus that was on the first preset is still here if you want to switch it out. So I have this off on all scenes right now. I don't even have it hooked up to a stomp, but you could go in and switch these out if you wanted to, if you preferred that chorus to the... So if we switch to our rhythm dry, this one is just rhythm with a delay on. And then you can add in anything, and then you can add to that anything you want. So let's say we want to add in the two screamer to kind of chunk it up. Or you can add in the chorus. Or the flanger. Or the phase on the up front. And then we've got our lead tone here. Again, we hit it with a tube screamer and maybe even the chorus. One thing I did too is on this scene, I set the chorus mix lower because the higher mix was overpowering it a little bit. So this still works. So I think it's kind of taking the info from that other preset, I think, and making it a little more usable. The other kind of wacky thing I did is I was watching that rig rundown, and one of the things they were calling out is how they have a need to try to get some 12-string guitar sounds, and how they're pushing the piezo output from the guitar through the fractal to get some pitch shift to try to mimic a 12-string guitar. And it got me thinking, it's like, could I kind of create something like that on the Quad Cortex? And I don't think I got really close to it, but the idea I had was a couple things. Now, first off, when you think about a 12-string guitar, you need to remember that on the lower strings, you've got a string paired with it that's an octave above it. But when you get to the B and E strings, the higher strings, they're just double strings. They're the same tone. So that has a very unique kind of aspect to it. So you couldn't just do a pitch shift an octave up and leave it at that. You needed to have a little more variability to that. So what I ended up doing was, my crazy idea was, I'm using the splitter and I'm doing a crossover split, and I've got the frequency set to about 725. And so the lower frequencies are going down into the parallel process, and those are, we are pitch shifting those up. And I've got the mix at about 40%. And then the frequencies, the higher frequencies, I'm doing kind of that doubling effect with a digital delay. And you can see here, the mix is at 50, and we've got delay time set really short, and we've got some mod on it. So again, we're trying to double the sound here. And I don't know that this really, let's turn off the chorus so we can hear it. I'm not sure how much this really makes it sound like a 12-string, but it was an interesting kind of exercise and an interesting result. So here's what we get. So So it adds something sparkle. It's kind of 12-string-ish, but it's not perfect. And I think a lot of this partially comes down to the fact that the pitch shifter on the quad Cortex is very synthy. And so it's very hard to get a pure kind of pitch shift, in my opinion. I'd be interested to try a pitch shift on a Fractal and see if it does any better. I just don't think that the pitch shift on the quad Cortex sounds very natural at all. So this is just something I added in. It's not hooked into any stomp pedals or in any scenes or anything like that, but I figured it was fun to play around with. So I will make both these presets available on my Cortex Cloud account. So the kind of the pure one here that I just recreated as exactly as I could from the Fractal info. And then this is, the one that I created that's intended to run in this hybrid mode. So grab the presets, play around with them, let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.